My name's Cordy, and our dog is a really big fan of Will Smith, and I actually had to hide my Wild Wild West DVD away. He wouldn't stop asking us to put that on. We don't even have a DVD player, so it's a bit ridiculous. Here's the evidence. Today I wanted to sort of do like a report card on the Strymon Iridium. It's been like a year now since it's been out. I think obviously there was a little bit of a weird start there where most people couldn't really get their hands on one, but I got one early on. Probably it's a big reason that some of you found this channel in the first place if you are watching, and I've done hundreds of videos with it. And so I wanted to kind of just reflect back on the year and see if any of my thoughts have changed on it, and maybe give it a bit of a dust off. And I guess we can talk about what it does well, where it could improve, how much effort it's putting in, and also what it could do in the future. So I think where the Strymon Iridium really excelled was, I guess probably most of us have had that experience with an amp modeler where you plug it in and potentially it's quite a while before you end up getting some usable tones out of it, or you've got to figure out some things. It takes time, essentially. There's a learning curve. What the Iridium did really well was just give you a limited amount of options and a simple EQ, drive and level, and kind of basically left you with 3 really good sounding amp models, and it's not really that easy to make it sound bad. I'll put the brush down now. So if you don't know, you probably do, but you've got a Fender Deluxe Reverb, that's amp A. Amp B is the Chime, which is a Vox AC30, and the Punch is a Marshall Plexi. So kind of those 3 classic sounds. Obviously it doesn't cover everything, but it covers enough that I think most people could get by using an Iridium, if you're not doing outrageous stuff. Coming out of the blocks, Strymon made quite a fuss about what this was capable of, and words like matrix technology, and fancy words about what it was that this was doing. That initial hype was what drove me to go and grab one, because I was thinking, well, I'm kind of skeptical about this, let's see what it actually sounds like. And as it happens, I think each of the models on this basically sound as good as anything else I've heard, in terms of a Vox emulation, a Fender emulation, and a Plexi emulation. I've heard other tones coming from modelers, but I don't think I've ever heard anything that's definitely better. And so what that means is, in this tiny little box, you basically get some really kind of top of the class kind of emulations. The Iridium has played well with others this year. It cooperates with others really well. Drive pedals, the only thing is that it can make you fall into a bad crowd, and then you end up buying a lot of pedals potentially. So it plays with drive pedals really well. I think some people have mentioned that things can get a bit fizzy, but that happens with a real amp as well. So if you put a drive pedal in front of certain amps, for instance, I've got a Fender Princeton downstairs. When I put any of my drive pedals in front of the Princeton, they all sound fizzy. It's just what happens when you put a lot of drive into a clean amp which has a lot of presence or whatever. One way to tame that is to kind of use some of the other cab selections. That was one kind of useful thing as well. The Impulse Manager. In the Impulse Manager they included some free IRs from some of the more respected IR companies, like Own Hammer. And I would encourage kind of anyone with an Iridium, find the cab selections that you don't actually like. So there's a few that I didn't like, and swap them out for some of the others. So I use the Own Hammer 112 Deverb Warm Dark cab in a few places, so I've got that on the Vox and on the Punch selectable, and on the Round as well, because it's an IR that I think works really well for what I want, and works with all of the models really well. So you can mix and match cabs, and don't be afraid to do that. Now, although simplicity is kind of at the forefront of the Iridium, there are things that you can do with it, and combinations of stuff that you can do, like changing the room, assigning morphing switches to an expression pedal, bits and pieces, turning off cabs, turning off amps. But all of that tends to require turning off and holding some combination of pedals. So you're going to need the manual for that. So although on the face of it, the simple stuff is simple, when you want to do something a bit more complex, I would have to go and get the manual. I don't know if you're doing it often enough. I'm guessing you might be able to remember what the combination and the secret combinations are. But for me right now, I couldn't tell you without looking at the manual how it is that you change the room size even. So when it comes to doing the more complicated things, it does kind of become a bit complicated. As I say, I think the emulations in there are some of the top of the class. Using 500 millisecond IRs, great as well. And they've selected some really cool IRs from other manufacturers that you can use for free. So let's talk about what it could do better. And I think one of the things that I was hoping for was that they might give us an option with the room setting to maybe put on some other reverbs. Given that that is essentially just a reverb, we could use like a spring reverb there, or maybe we could select something like a longer diffusion reverb. Obviously Strymon are great at reverb, so that was kind of one of the hopes that I had early on, that maybe they might give us that option in the editor. It's not happened as yet, but I can kind of cross my fingers and hope they will do that. The other thing is, like we've got these options with the cab, since Strymon have done such a good job of doing a deluxe reverb, a Vox and a Plexi, I kind of would hope that they might continue to work in this area and maybe bring some further upgrades to the Iridium. At the moment it's been a bit quiet on that front. Whether there are any plans to do anything further with it, I'm not sure. But for instance, just an idea, since the Round is a Fender style amp and the Chime is a Vox style amp and the Crunch is a Marshall style amp, couldn't we, for instance, maybe have a Fender Twin option that we could swap in and out, same way as we swap in and out cabs? Or, maybe like a Trainwreck, something like a souped up Vox, or maybe, a more aggressive Marshall style amp. So you could have models that are still in that same family, so the Fender family, the Vox family, or the Marshall family, but you've got a bit more variety. For instance, I think any kind of heavier players probably would want a little bit more gain than is on tap in there. That would make it possible, for instance, if you could add like a Marshall JCM 800 or something like that, that might go some way to making some kind of heavier players a bit more happy and maybe make the pedal a bit more versatile. That said, obviously it takes pedals, I think, very well once you've got it set up right. Maybe that's necessary, maybe that's not. It's just an idea that I kind of think there's plenty more they could do with the Iridium if they do choose to go like the route that many other manufacturers do now. I think the risk is, without doing some of these upgrades, that the Iridium will probably kind of start to stagnate. There's not many people screaming about it on YouTube anymore, and that's kind of one of the disappointing things as well. You see some big YouTubers that initially get their hands on the product but don't necessarily do that much with it, and it would be nice to see people kind of document more of their journey with it. I think, like a year on, are these YouTubers still interested in the Iridium? Do they use it ever? Or does it just sit on a shelf? It'd be interesting to see. I don't use it that often, maybe once a week or so, but if I was gigging, I think I'd get it out a bit more. It does just tend to sound great. So I think that's the report card for the Iridium. So far, really good. Great work that they've done so far with it. It'd be nice to see if they can do some more. Features that I'd really like is to maybe be able to swap in a different reverb kind of impulse, and maybe they might even bring out some new kind of amps and stuff for it and continue to build on what the Iridium has already done well. I think what the Iridium also helped do was kind of flesh out what the niche is for people that might want this kind of pedal. So people that already have a pedal board and have been taken around, like a Fender Deluxe Reverb or a Princeton or something, and then for some reason they want to go direct, or they've been asked to go direct. This is something that can do that job. And there's other options like Shiftline Twin. The Simplifier was one thing that I tried that I didn't really get on with, but I think the Iridium is definitely a good option. This is also another good option, and probably there's going to be more of these sorts of things that come along. I think the Vox Valve Energy, those are actually come to market now. I think I'm going to be able to show you some of those soon. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of one of the things that I liked about the Iridium, is that it's kind of showed that there is this way that you can do things. You don't necessarily have to have a Kemper that costs maybe $1,500. If you're just using one profile, the Iridium can sit at the end of a pedal board and basically do that job quite nicely. So are you still using your Iridium 1 year on, or have you fallen out of love with it? I'd be interested to know your thoughts. Thank you for stopping by. Cheers.